Hey everyone, Mr. Glover here. So today we're going to talk about interest. It's the start of our financial literacy chapter, and the main topic today is what's called simple interest. So we're going to start by defining what interest is. There's a few terms around financial math that we need to define, and then we're going to kind of talk about how interest works and how to calculate it. So suppose you want to borrow money to purchase a vehicle or invest money to save for a college education. Both of these situations will involve the use of interest. Interest is defined as money that is charged by the bank or other financial institutions for borrowing money. Basically, lending money isn't free, and interest is the cost associated with borrowing it. So essentially, it's a percentage of the amount that you borrowed that you agree to pay back, and that percentage is calculated on a yearly basis. Some terms to define. First of all, the principal. Principal is what you call the amount of money that you borrowed. So if you borrowed $500, you'd have a principal of $500. Term is the length of time that you borrow the money for. This is something you'd agree upon ahead of time. The fixed interest rate is a percentage of the principal that is agreed to be paid to the investor or lender. This rate does not change during the term of the loan or investment. So basically, the fixed interest rate is the percentage that you agree upon when you sign a loan or invest. Maturity date, that's when the contracted end date of a loan or an investment ends. And now I should probably be careful. Fixed interest rate, if you are investing in something like the stock market, you're not guaranteed to get a fixed interest rate for all kinds of investments. But when you borrow from a bank or any other financial institution, typically you will agree upon your interest rate ahead of time. So let's take a look at a problem. Colton needs to save money for college. He worked hard over the summer, saved up $500, and decided to invest it in Canada savings bond with a term of 5 years. This Canada savings bond has an interest rate of 6% per year on the original investment. Question A, how much interest was earned on the principal by the end of the first year? So if we take 6%, whenever you're doing these calculations, you have to be really careful. 6% is like 6 divided by 100, which is actually 0.06. So if we want to calculate the amount of interest, we take our principal, which is $500, and we multiply it by 0.06, and that gets us $30 in interest. So now let's complete this table, and we can analyze sort of how his money has grown over this 5-year term. So the value of the investment at the start of the year is going to be $500 at the start of year 1. Simple interest earned is the same every single time because it's based on the original principal. So you're earning $30 every year. The accumulated interest is going to be the amount of interest in total that you've received. So for your first year, you're going to receive $30. You're going to get $30 more the next year, so you'll have $60 at the end of year 2. You'll have earned $30 more in year 3, so this goes to $90, then to $120, and then to $150. And then the value at the end of the year is the interest plus the starting value. So value at the end of the first year is $530. That becomes the investment at the start of year 2. Add $30 more to it, and you're now up to $560. That's the start of year 3. Add $30 more, you're up to $590. That becomes the start of year 4. Add $30 more to it, you're now up to $620. That's the start of year 5. And then add $30 more, and you are up to $650 total. So this is the value. $650 is the value that you have at the end of your 5-year term. So you've earned $150 in interest. Is the simple interest earned by each year constant or variable? Because we're talking about simple interest, this is going to be a constant. So simple interest is constant. What will be the value of the investment after 5 years? That's going to be $650. And lastly, graph the growth of the investment until it's maturity. So we're not going to plot this point by point. We can, but in light of time, we're going to do it more of a sketch this time. So on this axis is going to be the value of our investment. So that's going to be dollars. So value in dollars. And on this axis is going to be time. Technically, it's going to be in years. Now, we started at $500, so we're going to start right here. We probably should label our axis more carefully here, but I'm trying to do this fairly quickly. The idea that I'm trying to get across is that since you're earning consistent amount of interest every time, your dollars are going to go up in a consistent way, and this graph is going to be linear. It's going to look something like this. At the very end here, I suppose this will be $650, and at the end here, this will be 5 years. It's not a very good graph because we go from 0 to 500, and the same distance goes to 650, but we can pretend like that is spaced out nicely. As you can see, it's not always convenient to use tables to solve problems involving interest. Instead, most people use a formula. So what we have here is a formula that you can use to calculate the amount of interest earned as long as it's simple interest. So I equals PRT. Now, each of these values is a variable. I is going to be your interest rate, or sorry, your interest earned. P is going to be the principal invested. R is going to be your interest rate. You need to be really careful here. This is not a percentage. Do not put 6 in, or what you're actually going to do is you're multiplying by 6. That's like 600%. And then T is the term or the time. Term is given in years because interest rate is usually given in years. So let's put this to the test. Let's try a question. Dora finds a fantastic investment that pays 10% of the principal yearly. And now that's quite a lot. Don't expect that you're going to get 10% right off the bat. She decides to put $400 into this investment in order to save up for a new car. How much interest will she earn after 5 years? So let's break down this problem. $400 is her principal, so P equals $400. The investment earns 10% interest, so R equals 10%, which is 10 over 100, or 0.1. And she's investing for 5 years, so T equals 5 years. So if we want to calculate the interest, I equals PRT. Principal is $400. The interest rate is 0.1, and the term is 5 years. So if we multiply this together, she will earn $200 in interest. Now that's just the interest earned. That's not how much money she has. We would then have to take 200, add it back to her $400. So she'd end up with 600. Now, people don't always save their money for exactly 1 or 2 years. I mean, if you sign up for certain types of investments, they'll make you invest for a certain amount of time. You might commit to 3 years or 4 years, but a lot of people will throw money into an account and take it out when they need it, or when it's reached a certain value. So we don't always have to use whole numbers when we're talking about time. We can have to change the value we use for T if we're not working with whole numbers, but we can use a fraction for this. So for example, if we're saving for 7 months, T is going to be 7 over 12, because there's 12 months in a whole year. You could also turn this into a decimal. If we're saving for 230 days, well, there's 365 days in a year, so T is going to be 230 over 365. So let's try a question like this. Principal of $3,500 was invested for 9 months at an interest rate of 3.24% annual interest. Calculate the simple interest earned on this investment. So let's break this down. First of all, we've got a principal, P equals $3,500. We have a investment for 9 months, so a term T is going to be 9/12. Interest rate of 3.24%, so R equals 3.24%, which again has to be divided by 100. So 3.24% is actually 0.0324. Got to be really careful here. This is the most common mistake that I will see is people forgetting this. And what we need to find is I, the interest rate. So I equals PRT is our starting point. We need to put our numbers in. Principal is $3,500. The interest rate R is 0.0324. And our term T is 9/12. So when we multiply these together, we end up with $85.05 in interest. This is a little bit more realistic. I probably should take a minute and kind of give you an idea what you can expect. We're going to be playing with all sorts of different values for interest. In reality, the higher the interest rate you take on, the more risk is associated with it. So the more likely you are to lose all of your money. If you are going to be lending to an institution that might lend to people who are more likely to default on their loan payments, you're probably going to get a higher interest rate, but you might also end up losing the value of your money. If you're going to gamble on the stock market, you might get a high interest rate because you might see your money double. You also might lose all your money or most of your money. So you have to be cautious. I would expect somewhere in the ballpark of around 6% is a reasonable number. Safer investments will be lower. More savvy investors probably end up in the 8 to 10% range or higher, but they take on the risk. If you use a savings account, right now, you're probably getting like half a percentage point. So a savings account will actually make your money devalue over time because the cost of living or inflation goes up about 2% a year. So if you're only earning 0.5% on your savings are actually losing 1.5% in value every year in terms of their purchasing power or their ability to buy. All right, we can use this equation to solve for something other than simply interest. So this time we're going to do a question using the same formula, but we're not going to calculate I. So principal was invested for 1.5 years at 3.59% annual interest. 81.85 was earned in simple interest. Calculate the principal that was invested. So let's unpack the question. We know we have an interest earned, I, of 81.85. We have a term T of 1.5 years. And we have an interest rate I of 3.59%, or sorry, R, 3.59%, which is 0.0359. We don't know P. And so we're going to have to rearrange our formula to solve for the principal. We know P equals, I equals PRT. But this time, we're interested in solving for the principal. So we need to divide by R and divide by T. You can do this in one step or in 2 steps, but you're going to result in the formula I over RT equals P when it's all said and done. Then you can put your numbers in. 81.85 was our interest earned, so 81.85 divided by interest rate R, which was 0.0359, times our term of 1.5 years. So we just have to put this in our calculators and solve for the principal. And we end up with a principal of $1,519.96. So what that means is this is the amount of money that would have had to have been invested for 1.5 years at 3.59% in order to actually get 85 or 81.85. in interest. So sometimes it's not always, well, it's not that it's not convenient, but sometimes we don't just want to find the interest. A lot of times people want to know how much money will I have at the end. They're not that interested in interest. They're more interested in how much money they have total. So there's something called the future value of an investment. And that future value is your amount of money you have at any point in time in the future. So rather than solving for I, we're going to solve for future value this time. So we've got a couple of formulas. The basic idea is that to find your future value, you need to take your principal and add your interest to it. If we take the formula I equals PRT, this sort of morphs our equation into A equals P plus PRT. And if you want to be a little bit more concise, you can simply write it like A equals P times 1 plus RT. Any of these formulas will work. The top formula you'll probably want to use if you're given the principal and you're given a dollar value for interest, because it's a simple addition. If you're not given those and you need to calculate the interest, sometimes doing the second formula works better for this third formula, I suppose. And again, A is going to be your future value. P is going to be the principal. R is your interest rate. And T is the term, or the length of time. So let's try a question. Principal of $1,000 was invested for 7 months at 3.25% simple interest. What is the future value of the investment after 7 months? So let's unpack the question. We have a principal P of 1,000. We have a term T of 7 months, so T equals 7 over 12. And remember, we're doing this because interest rate is usually given in terms of years. 7 over 12 is the ratio or the fraction of number of years that we've saved for. We have an interest rate of 3.25, so I equals 0.0325. That's 3.25% divided by 100. And we need to solve for A, our future value. So we can use whatever formula we want. Let's start out with the second one. A equals P plus PRT. All right, so for this question, we've got all of the numbers already solved for future values. So all we need to do is plug our numbers in. P is 1,000 plus 1,000 times R, I called it I, sorry, R of 0.0325 times T of 7 over 12. Be careful when you're putting this in your calculator. You need to make, sometimes it's easier to just calculate your interest and then add 1,000, but I'll leave it up to you. And I end up with $1,018.96. So that means we made $18.96 in interest over the lifetime of our investment. So now, you probably don't think that's a lot. $18 on $1,000 isn't much interest, but this is not a full year. You only had $1,000, and this is basically money that you got for nothing. You just let the money sit somewhere and you earned interest on it. So you want to be always trying to make your money work for you. And if you can have your money grow without doing anything with it, that's better than letting it sit and devalue itself. So you always want to try to at least earn 2%, because otherwise, if you're going to spend or if you're not going to spend your money, it's just losing value. Now, don't tie all your assets up into investments. You need to have some available money for things like if your car breaks down or you need to fix something in your house or whatever. But if you have a large portion that you're not planning on using for a while, invest your money and you will come out ahead. The other thing to keep in mind is that this is only 1,000. When people are saving for things like retirement, they often invest things like $100,000 or $1 million If you earned $18 on 1,000, you would have earned $180 on 10,000. You would have earned $1,800 on 100,000. So it's going to rapidly increase based on how much you put in. The more money you have, the easier it is to make money. If someone would just give me $1 million, I can make lots of money off of it. Just getting to that $1 million in the first place, that's the hard thing. What principal must be invested now at 1.25% annual simple interest to have an amount of 174 in 2 years? Okay, so let's write out what we know. 1.25% is our annual interest rate. So R equals 0.0125. We have an amount of 174. Your textbook uses the word amount. I really dislike this. I will call this the future value, because that's the proper terminology. You need to know how much money you will have in the future. You're not looking for an amount, but I digress. So future value is 174. 2 years is your term, so T equals 2 years. But what we don't know is P. So we can pick any version of this formula we want. I'm going to pick the last one because it's a little bit simpler to solve for P. So A equals P times 1 plus RT. And by the way, you wouldn't be expected to memorize these. If you were writing a test, for example, I would be giving you a formula sheet on this stuff. Not really something to worry about right now, but you don't need to spend time trying to memorize it. Okay, so we need to find the principal P, which means we need to divide A by 1 plus RT. So A divided by 1 plus RT equals principal. Plug in our numbers. We have a future value of $174. We're going to divide that by 1 plus 0.0125 times time, which is 2 years. If you're more comfortable, you can calculate the denominator separately and then do a second calculation. That might be easier when you're just starting out with this stuff, but remember that the more times you do that, the more times you're going to round your numbers, which means you're more likely to end up with an inaccurate number at the end. The less calculations you do, the more accurate your number is going to be at the end because you're not rounding. So let's do the calculation. 174 divided by 1 plus 0.0125 times 2. Right. And I have $169.76. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, how did we get $174 out of only $169.76? You got to remember what's going on here. This is how much you invested. You only ended up with 174, so you really only made about $4.25. This is 174 is not the interest earned, that's the total future value. Okay, so a couple little distinctions. You've got to be really careful how you set these questions up. But I think as far as the math goes, I think everybody should be able to rearrange these equations. It's going to take a bit of practice, of course, but I know that everybody has the skills needed to do this. So I've got some questions for you to try. They're based on your workbook, page 616. That's going to be your homework assignment for today. Give the questions a shot. We will talk a bit more about this in our meeting on Wednesday. And if you've got any questions that pop up, just shoot me an email and I'll see if I can answer them for you. Anyways, I'm going to end the video now. Have yourselves a great rest of the day, and I will see you all hopefully at some point this week or on Wednesday in our meeting. All right, bye for now.